probably not a surprise when you throw it out there as a line. Having studied research and looked over the last 3 years at INFUSE research, this number has gone from the high 30s up into the 60s. And when you have the qualitative conversations, it's even higher, the pressure to get to revenue and pipeline. So you're not alone out there. But when you're looking at what companies are doing or what teams are doing to try to improve the ROI and performance, look what jumps to the top. Increasing lead quality. That poses a bunch of questions. A very noble effort. At least we're not in lead volume where we were 2 years ago, where that was number one. And we all felt the feelings of being in a lead machine. As a majority of people are measured on pipeline and revenue, and sales is not getting the same kind of access, that pressure is very, very strong. And we do see a shift from last year that while these two are at the top, there are a much greater percentage of focus. So more and more of us are getting to that effort. I'm not going to go down the rat hole of MQLs are dead and all that nonsense. Although if you guys have any opinions on that from our panel, we're welcome to it. But hopefully we're beyond that and we know that what the goal is here. If you look at last year's KPIs, and we put those in here because we thought it was interesting, is the number of leads generated, but look at the percentage differences. That's a pretty big shift, and we've been seeing that number continue to move and to change more towards pipeline and revenue. So if you're not measuring by pipeline or revenue, I think that's going to be the expectation by your leaders, your board, and certainly any investors if you're in that environment. But
Scott,
yeah, please.
If you go back 2 slides, what's not on here is the pie chart, maybe one more. What's not on here is a focus on brand health and building your brand for the long-term game. This still shows, as does the next slide, a heavy focus on conversion metrics, on pipeline metrics, whereas there's an entire story to be told, building your brand for health against your competitors. So just throwing it out there. I don't have a long comment. I'm sure we could go down that rabbit hole, but that's very interesting to see that this is still where the focus is.
Yeah. And so we know that awareness and trust and relevance matter to conversion, Liz, to use your words. What are you guys doing in terms of brand? What are you doing in terms of adding that ingredient or focusing your effort around that? Heather, do you have any perspective there?
My perspective is probably very different from the other folks on the call. Cisco has a very strong brand and we have an always-on presence there, but we're focusing more of our dollars and efforts on reaching net new audiences and driving net new conversations across our portfolio because it is so vast. So we're shifting a bit more from brand into the demand components for the longer tail, more outcomes-based activities. Yeah,
conversions is a big word for you and the team right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Sarah, how about from your perspective?
Yeah, it's opposite of Heather. Man, I know that's a problem to have, but we're definitely on the opposite spectrum, right? Open Sesame is, if you're not familiar with it, it's e-learning and like content curation. So heavy on workforce development and content. And we have some big competitors out there that do have a greater brand presence. And coming in, it's funny that Liz had mentioned that because I saw, I think it was 18% on that other slide. It was like 18% are thinking about brand. And it is such a hard internal sell, right? Like coming in, I have this different perspective right now of when you're coming in and it's very well known of, okay, marketing and sales is going to work together. We're now shifting into this revenue piece and conversions, and that's the focus. And we know that I think it's less than 10% of people fill out forms and do the things that we talk about conversions. Like we need to focus on the brand. But internally, like I'm finding that there has to be a lot of work to get buy-in from the finance stakeholders, the C-suite stakeholders, and all the people that need to have that shift in mentality to focus on the heavy, harder content and harder lift things like creating our, what our influencer programs and actually building our messaging, that doesn't quite translate immediately. Right? I think it's that story of it's easy to measure. It's easy to measure what we can put into Salesforce and what we can put into our CRM. Not so easy when we think of brand. So I find internally there's a lot of work that has to be done, and proof and little, kind of some of those smaller notches of, hey, here's a customer story that we're hearing anecdotally is impactful, and here's, influencer program. So I think, kind of long story short, there's a lot of internal work outside of just the external work to make brand a reality. And a lot of marketers just choose the easy way, or easy-ish way to be able to track what they can measure.
Yeah, so you're saying too, and I'm hearing it loud and clear, the key ingredient is make sure that brand is part of your demand effort.
Yeah.
And that these things marry up.
It's like a line. It's like if we prove, I feel like if you can prove as a marketer and the marketing team, hey, yes, we're generating pipeline and revenue, and that proof of that gives a little bit of leeway of, and trust us when we say, actually, we need to put 20% of our budget or 10% of our budget to test out this brand effort here, because we're doing the things that are making the business move short term.
Yeah, and the ability to tell stories and use examples, which kind of leads to our next thing, is this balancing act that we have that you all described, that you have to show conversions and performance metrics are by revenue and pipeline, but still the demand, internal demand, is for sales ready leads to feed the sales team or to feed your inside sales team. And how do you balance those two things? And brand may be the extra ingredient and formula in the influencer programs and messaging that's going to move those quote unquote potential prospective buyers or leads to conversations that are meaningful, to use Heather's word, that you're aiming for. But this is what we find so interesting is, yes, I'm measured on this, but at the end of the day, I'm still, as a group, as a demand community, we're still reacting to the needs of sales. We're treating sales many times like our customer, not our partner. That's the reality. It's not pointing fingers or a negative thing. I think it's some of the reality of how we navigate that. Any other commentary on this real challenge that comes out through the research?
Yeah, one other thing, Scott, and as I mentioned, I think different from Sarah and Heather, who are very integrated into their own organizations. We on the agency side have to play the agnostic middleman, and so we ask a lot of questions and push back on clients and prospects, not because we distrust their decisions, but to act as that mediator and that almost voice of reason to say, you might want to invest here versus here, but let's talk about why. And what we hear a lot of is that when we say the words like invest in brand, a lot of folks who haven't done that or in high volume get very scared by that, because there's this inherent definition, or at least what they think is the definition of brand, which is invest a lot of money in something that can't be measured. Relevant? Does it resonate with what you're looking for? Is it educating you, or is it simply just a product white paper? We're also looking at website traffic as an indicator of health over time, not from a paid perspective, but from an organic perspective. How are your branded terms and non-branded terms trending? And then using SEO tools also to have a little deep insight into what competitors are doing.
Yeah. So if we look at that summary, executives, not that they don't care, but they want the results and the outcome. So I think what you're also saying is we have to show the role that brand can play. And it may take some qualitative examples along with the studies that you do to be able to move that needle. What we don't want to do is, I want to spend 20% on a new brand campaign. That's not going to fly. But if we can integrate, what I'm hearing is if we can integrate our brand motions and influencer programs and elevate our content into our demand and outreach efforts, we're going to be in a better position. And I think we're in the world where brand and demand are blending, and we're all learning how to do that better and better, versus we do an ad campaign over here and a demand campaign over there. I think those days are gone. Well, wonderful. The challenge still is there. Our sales teams are going to be hungry. They're getting less access. They want more access. So we have to balance this between measuring outcomes and being able to still feed the team, our partners in sales. That hasn't gone away, even though things have changed. So let's talk a little bit about some of the strategies and plans that the demand community around the globe has shared as their priorities and their focus. So the first is really around, not a surprise probably to anybody. I don't know if this has been drilled into our noggins that this is the right way to go, but it's certainly the predominant go-to-market demand motion and model out there. What we're seeing is the partner-led, especially as cloud AI companies start to build an ecosystem of partners around their platforms and their systems. We're seeing that. And as more technology goes mainstream in terms of apps and users, we see the community and product-led growth. I will just say that the one big stamp I will put on this is that product-led growth, it's good that it's getting balanced, because boy, did it look good to investors. But all we did is put a product-led motion, hoping that the product team and that the users would self-serve without changing our product. So it's good to see that in check. It certainly has a lot more potential. I think we'll see a lot of it. Any strategies here that jump out or that you're thinking about or changing up? Sarah, let's start with you there.
Yeah, I always grin when I see ABM and ABX. I'm big on that train, but I'm also on the pragmatic side of, what does that even mean? I think the definition of that is different to every single person. I think it's critical, but one of the things that I predict that we'll see more with this, and I would even, kind of place my money on those who put this in, was does that mean from an actual, you're truly going after specific accounts, our traditional one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many, or using intent data to now augment your go-to-market campaigns and your traditional campaigns? Because I feel like that's more of what's happening, and that's a good thing, right? I think in the better teams can get with that. We're doing the same ourselves, of really recalibrating. Let's not talk of ABM and ABX in these high kind of big mystery terms of what specifically are we using, what type of data are we activating on accounts to create new content and to arm our sellers and our marketing teams with the right messaging. My only other comment here is, I am very, I don't come traditionally from a big partner-led or partner marketing background. However, I've dove straight into it in my new role, because our org has over 40% of revenue is from partners, attributed to partners. It's huge. It's really, really significant. And I'm finding early on that it is such an untapped market, and it's such a significant market to get down right. And it shows the importance of our relationships with the partners, that I think we're going to also see more as ABM continues to be a thing, continues to be a fad. But that relationship piece with partners directly correlates with how you try relationships with customers and how you arm customers in the same way. I'm seeing a lot of correlation of how do you go partner-led versus how does that actually, it's another variation of ABM and ABX.
Yeah, very few companies have one go-to-market motion. Most have 2 to 3, depending on the product line, the region, et cetera. So these come together because more than 2/3 of actually technology products and services are purchased through the channel as we knew it: solutions, integrators, resellers, VARs, if you use old school language. As you move into this near-bound mindset, I'm going to buy a platform and use all the ecosystem partners around it that can plug into it, that I know work, that are accessible, to take the friction, not out of just buying, but making decisions because I know they're integrated. So I put a big circle around this, and anybody who's worked in partner, channel, affiliate marketing know there's a big bucket of marketing that often goes unspent because it is difficult to work through that channel. So we've got a big circle around this here at Infuse, and we're going to, I'm sure, watch this needle move. The other concept in this group, I know because we've talked about it, is how do we move from that funnel mindset to generating a lead, throwing it over the wall, MQL to SQL, to now not only helping the buyer and the buying committee on that journey, no matter what go-to-market model you're using, but pulling that through into marketing and selling to our existing customers, our full portfolio, or other regions or business units. So these numbers are very helpful, by the way. You'll get these slides, but I would definitely be using this and driving this conversation within your company, because we see more and more revenue being generated and profitable revenue being generated when you have the bow tie model, which is not just restricting someone's in and I'm done,